Okay, so now we're gonna go over some really like basic knife cuts, things that I think are pretty useful in any sort of kitchen, and we'll go over some of the techniques, kind of bringing together everything that we've talked about so far. So the first thing that we're gonna go over is just like a small dice. Small dice typically looks like this, you know, small 1/4-inch pieces. It's a square cut. A lot of times you're going to use that when you're cutting onions for salads, or if you're using them in a sauce, a chili, you know, taco, anything like that. So when you're figuring out what kind of cut you want to use, you know, you want to have some forethought thinking about like, what is the finished product supposed to look like? How is this going to be eaten? How is this going to cook? And so that's when you determine what type of a cut you're going to use. For onions, when we're cutting really anything, we want to make sure that we're creating flat surfaces. So instead of just taking one of these guys and keeping it round and trying to plow through it, we're cutting it in half, pulling the peel off. I like to leave the butt intact, or the root end intact, so that it kind of keeps the onion shape together. And then I'm creating this flat side. So just like my board doesn't move, my onion's also not going to move. And then I'm just going to go at it horizontally with a couple small incisions. Again, keeping my fingers all the way pinched at the top so that I'm protecting myself, but this is stabilized. I did a couple incisions, not all the way through to the root, but about 3/4 of the way back. And then I'm going to take my knife and I'm just making some vertical incisions on the way down, following the natural curvature of the onion. So now my onion is split this way and it's split horizontally. The only thing that's left to do is to take my onion and then dice it. And I'm cutting up until this butt, and then I just toss that butt away, get the product off of my blade, and I can see that I have a nice dice of onions. Instead of scraping my knife against the board to collect all of this and dulling it, I'm just going to use my bench scraper. I pick up the product and put it into a bin with the rest of the prepared product. And then my surface is clean, my knife stays sharp, and my product's going where it's supposed to go. Some other things to think about. So we just diced the first onion. Over here I have a couple onions that are already clean. I want to take out all of that process in one fell swoop. So like, I'm not going to take this onion, peel it, cut it in half, take the skin off of it, and then dice it just one by one. I'm going to cut them in half, put a pile over here. Then I'm going to peel them all, move that pile over to here. Whatever's comfortable on my board, I would fill it up and do one process continuously, and then move on to the next process continuously. And then when it comes time to actually do the cutting, I have a series of cleaned onions over here, and I can just move through that way. It's just a lot more efficient rather than doing, you know, 4 different tasks, one after the other. You do one task consistently, you build a lot of muscle memory, and you become very efficient. So I take my already cleaned onion, and again, we're just gonna do a couple horizontal incisions, a couple vertical incisions, not all the way through. And then when I get to here, again, I have my grip, my claw, my thumb is very well protected behind. I have a good handle on this, and I'm just kind of using a rocking motion to get through the product. I actually make contact with the onion on the way back through, and then the incision is made, and then I rock my way through. And again, I'm just moving back. My knife is angled away from me, and I have a nice fine dice. Get the bench scraper out again. And that's it. Next cut that we're going to go over is the julienne. Again, I think it's important to think about whatever your finished product is going to be. Whatever the finished product is going to be, you give a lot of thought into like what's an appropriate knife cut for that. So when it comes to julienning vegetables, a lot of times what we're trying to do is just create these like long, thin strips. For onions, they're kind of perfect for julienning because they already come with a lot of different layers, so they're doing a lot of the work for us. But when it comes to julienne, we're going to cut these long, vertical, right down the natural. There's like these lines in an onion. We're just going to follow that. Maybe we will cut in between the lines and we'll do a little bit thicker, but for the most part, we're just going to cut right down the natural curvature of the onion. So we already have our onions in half. These ones already have the stem off. We're going to want to cut the stem off of all of our onions because we don't need it. We're just trying to get strips. A lot of people will cut them this way. That's not a julienne. This is more of like a slice, a half moon, something like that. We're looking for pole to pole. So the stem was up here, the root was down here. We can see these natural lines in the onion. We're just going to set it down. Again, I like my little grip with my thumb and my pinky finger protected, my other knuckles out, and I'm just going to rock through. and cut thin strips the whole way down. And my fingers are just kind of flowing backwards naturally. And then it gets a little dicey right here. You're feeling a little uncomfortable. Again, we just create a larger, flatter, wider surface to finish off the project. And then we move it away. So again, onion here, cutting straight down in a rocking motion. Oops. And then the second we get a little bit uncomfortable, we just switch, create a wider, flatter surface. Set the knife down, use our bench scraper, collect all of our product, preserve that beautiful sharp edge on our knife. All right, so now we're gonna go over chopping. Chopping's like it's a crude cut. Things don't have to necessarily be uniform, but a lot of times it'll come up in a recipe. It'll say, rough chop these onions, rough chop these carrots, rough chop this celery or anything like that. So we're gonna do carrots. We're gonna just go over like a basic chop and like, if it's an imprecise cut, why go over it? Why have it in recipes? It's because the finished product doesn't matter. Sizing doesn't necessarily matter, but like, this isn't usable as it is. We still need to process it down, so we're gonna chop it. When would you use a chop, for example? If you're making a stock and you need to get a lot of vegetables into a pot with, say, chicken backs or with veal bones or anything like that, you're gonna chop. You're gonna take this, you're not gonna necessarily throw in a 50-pound bag of whole carrots. You're gonna take it and you're just gonna cut irregular sized pieces. And you're just gonna move through it like that, and you move them into this side. Or let's say if you needed to, you can't put this in the food processor, right? Say you need to do make like a meal or a puree, or you're gonna put it through the buffalo chopper. You're not gonna put whole carrots into the buffalo chopper, you're just gonna rough chop them. So again, just really irregular pieces, doesn't need to be specific at all. You're just trying to get them into smaller working bits so that you can use them in the recipe the way that they need to be used. All right, so the next cut that we're gonna go over is a mince. I got some parsley here. We're just gonna practice mincing it a little bit and just talk kind of about the technique. Typically when you're gonna do a mince, you're talking about an inexact cut, but really I'm trying to get it as small as I can possibly get it. And I'm trying not to like beat up whatever the product is that I'm using. So a lot of times you'll mince shallots, you'll mince garlic, you'll mince a lot of fresh herbs, things like that. And again, you're trying to get it like really, really small, but you're trying not to mash it. So I have some flat leaf parsley here, and I'll just grab a little handful out. I like to grab about as much as I'm comfortable sort of handling and try to get it into like a little ball. I grab my knife, I'm gonna pinch just like I normally do. I'm gonna keep my fingers, my offhand sort of set up like I would normally set it up, and I'm just gonna trim a little bit here just to get the bottom area flat so that I'm cutting on the same plane. And then I'm just gonna like glide through. And here I might keep my blade really close to my fingers because I don't want to give too much of the product away, and I just want to kind of skim through it or slice through it as tight as possible. And then I just keep doing this. I'm just working my way through. What I'm not doing is just mashing down. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just kind of gliding gently and slowly. And the goal is when you get done mincing and you've sliced through everything that you have here, and again, just like doing that rocking motion, when I'm looking at what I have under here, there's not like a big green patch. It's hard to see on a green board, but if you're on a whiteboard or something like that, or a wooden board, you don't want to see a big green stain. And you get that stain from doing a lot of this or doing a lot of this. And sometimes that works okay if you have an exceptionally sharp knife, but if your knife's dull at all, you're gonna just mash up and bruise all of your herbs. And especially when you're cutting something like parsley, cilantro, basil, anything like that, the leaves are kind of delicate. So you want to just kind of like bunch them up And you want to just let the knife do the work. Glide through. And just keep it really, really thin, really, really tight. And when you smell the parsley when you're cutting it this way, it smells really nice. When you look at it, it doesn't look bruised, it doesn't look beat up, it still looks the same color that it was. The mince isn't really exceptionally disruptive to the herbs or anything like that. And you get these really nice tiny pieces that once you put them into whatever dish that you're making, whether it's a salad, you're finishing a pasta, you're putting it into a soup or anything like that, it's adding a level of brightness to the dish that you're not going to get if you just were to take this and just beat it up. I've seen cooks, chefs do this, and then once the herbs have been sitting around for 3 to 5 minutes, you look at them and they're all wet, they're beat up, they're wilted, they're stained, and they're kind of tainted. So that's the mince. Hopefully that was helpful. All right, so now we're going to go over slicing. Slicing in general, pretty standard cut. We're really just trying to create like little pieces here, little nice slices of an apple. A lot of times you could use it for an apple. You could slice a carrot. You might break down a piece of cooked meat by slicing a piece of beef or slicing turkey or anything like that. It's ultimately just like one cut. For this apple, when it comes to slicing it, my goal is to just take it off of this core. I created a flat surface. I'm cutting down, cutting these pieces, moving them away. Flat surface again, moving it away. And finally another flat surface. And then I've got all of my little apple pieces right here, and then I'm just going to take them one at a time and just nice little slices. Rocking through, just like we did with the onion. I got my thumb and my pinky finger protected. I've got my little pinch grip here, and I'm just doing little incisions, just a nice, comfortable rock. And you can really get into a nice groove. And again, sharp knife is super important, especially for something like this, and the rocking motion is important too, because I'm really letting the knife do the work for me. I'm not putting almost no weighted pressure down. When I rock, you can see right now, I just drag the knife back and I've already made a little incision. Once I'm in through that skin, then it's just a tiny bit of force on the way down. And so really, like, knife's making contact right here. And it's just a really clean, comfortable motion. And you can just kind of really like move through it very, very quickly, and really go through a lot of apples in a really short amount of time. Slicing is something that I think, slicing cucumbers, some food processors have the attachment and they can kind of take care of the work for you, but again, they're not going to be nearly as delicate as a sharp knife could be. So having a good slice in your arsenal is really helpful. Okay, now we're going to go over just some basic techniques for slicing bread. You can see that I switched to a white cutting board from the green cutting board. Just generally, green cutting boards are used for produce, vegetables, fresh fruits, herbs, things like that. When you're cutting bread, cutting dairy, anything like that, those contain allergens. You want to use a white board, an all-purpose board. We use these for basically, like I just said, lots of prepared foods, bread, dairy, stuff like that. So I got my piece of bread. A lot of people, I think, would want to use a chef knife. I said earlier, this is the powerhouse of the kitchen, and it really is. But a lot of times when it comes to like cutting bread, you kind of want to preserve this nice sort of fluffy, airy interior. And a lot of times when you're cutting with a chef knife, you can't get that in there, and you do a lot of this. You do a lot of like compressing, really doing a lot of crushing. And you can see right here, the bread is kind of crushed there. All those nice little air pockets have been compressed all the way down, and now it's just a little bit gummy. So we're not going to use a chef knife. We're going to use a serrated bread knife instead. This one has an offset handle, so the blade's down here, and then it shoots up to an offset handle. So when I'm doing my slicing, my knuckles get to stay right off the board, which is really nice. When I'm using this, I want to make use of these teeth. And the only way to make use of these teeth is by, creating like a sawing motion. So I don't put any pressure down. I'm just doing some very light sawing, and you can see we still have all those nice little air pockets. It's in really good shape. So again, no pressure, just let the knife do the work. Once you get in, you can add just a little bit, but again, you're still creating that slow sawing motion and just letting that knife, letting these teeth do the work for you. So I think when it comes to using the bread knife, I think in a school kitchen, institutional kitchen, a lot of time what you're using it for is like cutting sandwiches. So you've made a sandwich, now you need to cut it in half before you wrap it or display it or anything like that. And I think having these teeth on here and being able to move through the bread without like really pushing it down, your meat's not gonna fall out of your sandwich, you're not gonna crush it, you're not gonna lose the lettuce. You can really just like put a little bit of pressure on, create that sawing motion, and really preserve the natural beauty of whatever it was that you spent a lot of time assembling. That's why the bread knife is really just, I think, the most useful tool when it comes to cutting sandwiches and cutting bread, and a chef knife just really isn't appropriate. So I've been working in kitchens longer than I want to admit on camera, and I got to say that like my knife skills, it's just been a constant journey. I've worked with a lot of chefs, worked next to a lot of chefs, a lot of great cooks. We've all sort of exchanged tips, tricks, things like that. I have purchased knives over my life and tried to make a big collection. It's really the most essential tool that I have when I'm working in a kitchen, and the skills and tips and techniques that I have that I tried to share with you today have been essential in my work in kitchens for my whole life. So no matter where you are, I think everybody's kind of at a different place when it comes to like their personal knife skills journey, and you should feel very comfortable with that. There's nothing to be embarrassed about wherever you are. I think starting with proper form, building a foundation of technique can really help you when you're working in these kitchens. And I think a lot of the tips and tricks that we went over today, I'm hopeful are really helpful to you on the rest of your journey.